Is this recording here too? Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Healing Conversations with Dr. Carlos Warter and Getrude Matshe here in Melbourne, Australia. Welcome back, Dr. Warter. Please tell everybody where you are. What are we going to be talking about this week?
I'm in the San Diego area in California, where I live. I think that this week many things have happened. I wish I could say that the most important thing that happened this week is the celebration of the International Day of Peace on the 21st. Yet it wasn't precisely a day of peace, I'm sorry to say. It was a day in which the ruler of Russia, as he likes to be called today, because president is too much of a Western title for him, on the 21st, on the International Day of Peace, on the day that the General Assembly gathers once a year around that day, day before, day after, to increase human cooperation, at least human dialogue, he ordered the mobilization of 300,000 men who, in my heart of hearts, I believe did not sign up to get killed in an unfair war. A war that on February 24th was unilaterally provoked by the invasion of the Russian troops in Ukraine, which, had this been the only event in the years of the Putin era, one could say something happened here because he accused the Ukrainians of neo-Nazis and a lot of other things that, whether they're true or not, I don't know. But the destruction and the havoc that has been created over the Ukrainian territory, just a few days after he recognized a portion of the national territory of Ukraine as independent republics, that, as we see now, he wants them to enter into the Russian Federation. Because the illusion here is the reconstruction of the Tsar Empire, and we're talking about monarchies a few days ago, and here we are again, a leader of Russia has in his background the insignia of the Tsars, in which one hand of the eagle holds the scepter and the other hand holds the globe. So, power over the whole world. But as I was saying a minute ago, the non-difference, the similitude of the gassing of children that happened in Syria by Putin supporting the Assad regime, the atrocious invasion of Georgia with the separation of one of their beautiful provinces as another Russian republic, the destruction of Chechnya, make me humbly think that there is something not operating, and I must say this as a psychiatrist, it's not operating well in this man's mind, who at a time in which we could be reaching for one humanity, what is happening is an accusation of the West, and the West is not innocent, I understand, of inciting a war of destruction against Russia. I'm not privy to that. Maybe it has been happening, I don't know. But I know that a lot of women and children, a lot of men have been annihilated, whether in a mass grave, which is totally unfair for the time we're living in. Not that it was fair 100 years ago, but it is really crazy, I must say, that people are being tortured and killed and maimed, and families are being disrupted. And, you know, this series that's called The House of the Dragon, which is something to the continuation of Game of Thrones, I'm sure you, when they show the fighting and the destruction, it is no different than what happened in Europe in this sorrowful and pitiful year of this attack. On the other hand, I know that peace is not the absence of war. It makes me very sad that people still think that having peace means not mobilization. Peace is a state of consciousness. It's a state that we can inwardly access, acquire, experience. And in my views, it's the most important thing that we can learn in a lifetime. Because in my meditations, I have realized that peace is the most important thing, experience, for living as well as for dying. If we don't cross over in peace, who knows what happens? If we don't live in peace, we do know what happens. What do you think?
Well, you have unpacked a lot in just these few words. You know, I've been observing the happenings in the world this week, observing the collapse, hopefully, of the British Empire with the passing of the Queen and her funeral this week. I've been observing what is happening in Iran, the death of that young woman in custody, in police custody, by the morality police for exposing her hair in public. You know, it makes you wonder what actually happened. What are the circumstances? How did she die? And then, of course, Russia. And I feel a shift of consciousness. I feel there is something coming. I was watching a CNN report of a group of Russian mothers saying, we do not want our children to go and die in this war. There is a rise of a feminine energy that is needed in the world right now. Then you go to Iran, the same thing. And the Iran government has shut down WhatsApp and Instagram to try and stop the spread of what's actually happening on the ground. But women are mobilizing in huge numbers, protesting against this dictator, even saying words like death to the dictator, which would never be uttered before. So sad as it is to see people being brutalized by their own governments, young men being forced to go to war, I think the romantic notion that war is something victorious and glorious has gone. The reality of the aftermath and the impact of war on both those being attacked and the attacker, we now have the evidence. I'm sure with your work, post-traumatic stress is one of those huge, huge fallouts from these traumatic experiences that men go through and have to come back and act normal, like nothing has happened. You know, they say that when you take the life of another, you take away a piece of your own humanity. It's something you never forget. It's something you never recover from unless you're a psychopath. The normal human being is affected by taking the life of another human being. So I'm excited to see these changes. I remember when I was a child, I studied Wilfred Owen's First World War poetry. I was 14, 15 years old, and we had an English teacher who came from the UK, and he took us outside for a poetry lesson. He made us lie on the grass under a shady tree, and we had to close our eyes. And he read Wilfred Owen's First World War poems. I fell in love with poetry from that point because of the way he painted the pictures with words. I remember one poem, I can't even remember the title, but it was something like, "Red lips are not so red as the stained stones kissed by the English dead." There were scenes in the poetry where the soldiers had inhaled the gas and their lungs were dissolving and the froth was coming out through their mouths. And it was a period in my life where I really got to understand the impact of war. In Zimbabwe, we had just gone through our own civil war against the British at the time. The closest I got to experiencing the war was when our liberation fighters blew up a petrol tank very near to our home. The main fuel supply in the whole country was designated by the freedom fighters. And seeing the flames from right outside our home, I had a lot of family members who were affected in worse ways, especially in our villages. I have cousins, young girls who were taken to go and fight in the war. These young girls ended up being sex slaves to the liberation fighters. I have cousins who came back pregnant with babies. And war is an ugly thing. It is a horrible experience. And I feel like there is a rise in our consciousness collectively that it's not a solution, and people don't want to experience this anymore.
Yeah. I heard a song that is going around the planet, sang by women, guitar and voice, and the words are, "Women don't go to war. Women do not go to war. Women do not make war." And this is growing. The only condition to join this movement, they say, is take your guitar out, get your group, and sing it. And it's happening everywhere. It's happening all through Europe. It's happening in Latin America. It's growing. Because I think, and I'm reminded about a queen of a tribe in Ghana who many years ago, maybe 30 years ago, told me in Japan that when the tribes fought with each other, bow and arrow, people died till the mothers of both tribes came out and says, "Enough. You've played enough. This is it. We don't want to lose more people." But then she said, unfortunately, they don't fight with bow and arrow anymore. They have been sold weapons, machine guns, rifles, pistols, guns of all kind. And it is massive what's going on amongst the tribes. And not only the tribes in Africa, but the human tribes. How much of a business this war creation is, with the threat of extinction. We are playing it very close, not only through climate change, but also through the threat of nuclear war. When a head of state of the Security Council, such as the head of Russia, says that they have missiles, be careful, West, because they might use it. We have lost all senses. We have all lost reason. And of course, we have lost our hearts, because this is something one doesn't play with. It makes me very, very sad that not only does a country invade a sovereign nation, maybe not made of sovereign individuals, but a sovereign nation that's next door, but threatens with another element of annihilation. I was very active in the 70s and 80s in movements that were accusing the insanity of nuclear weapons. In the International Day of Peace of 1987, I and the foundation I founded got awarded the Messenger of Peace Award from the United Nations. What is it? 35 years later, I have very little trust in the United Nations. It's a lot of talk, rhetoric, and appearance. But what about the human rights? Not just the human right I stand for, which is the right to awaken and discover the consciousness of what a human being, a psychospiritual entity, represents. But I'm talking about basic human rights. The enslavement of people through hunger, the enslavement of people through jobs that are miserable, and above all, through ignorance. Ignorance of what it means to meditate and to discover what is at the core of ourselves, which is beautiful, which is loving, which needs to manifest more. I agree with you that what women have been doing in Iran is unheard of, and I'm very happy and hopeful that this theocratic dominion comes to an end and falls of as high a crane as they send down homosexuals on a chair because they're abhorred by their immorality, when it is known that it has existed forever and ever, and that punishing the sexual behavior of anybody, male, female, gay, LGBTQ, is none of anybody's business. What is private is private. I have a friend. She is a wonderful human being who wrote a book many years ago that says, "What you think of me is none of my business." And I was paraphrasing it today with some people, and I said, "What you want of me is none of my business. It's your want."
Oh, wow. So let's talk a little bit about peace. I read a quote once that said, "Peace begins with me," that it begins with every human being on this planet being able to tune into that quiet place within themselves for the ripple effect of that to go into the world.
Yeah. And to get to know the fact that if you are doing better, I'm doing better. That we are in this together. That Dalai Lama says purpose of a human being is to assist others, to help them, to do good, to be compassionate, and at least not to damage them. And we damage each other by not following the path, I believe, of inner exploration. We are so focused with our eyes outside that we don't take the time to take a deep breath and explore the silence. Thus, we become identified with all the annoying thoughts that percolate like in a lake, some sand. And instead of meditating, which would be allowing these annoying thoughts to go down and settle and be in the liquid part of the lake and not in the solid part of particles, we have taken the option of constantly looking at the particles and getting angry and getting sad and getting bitter and getting excited and getting depressed instead of just giving. I say in my work, instead of becoming a go-getter, aim to become a go-giver.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. So it starts with each and every individual one of us. It starts in your home. It ripple effects into your community.
It starts in your heart. Because when it starts in my heart, no matter what's happening around me, my focus will be correct. We need to take care of ourselves so we can take care of others. We need to love ourselves so we can love others. We need to discover ourselves so we can discover who is another. And our educational model is upside down. It is always about the others. And I ask, if we can have some compassion for others, which is wonderful, should we not have some compassion for ourselves?
Yeah. So, for those of us who aspire to see this ripple effect go out into the universe, give us some practical steps, 3 things that everybody can do today to get a sense of peace.
The first inquiry, I think, is the question, who am I? And a good meditation for that is to feel the sensations that go on in my body. Feel them, acknowledge them, and deeply say, yes, I have the sensations, yet I am not that. Then we see that emotions rise and fall and rise and fall. We can look at that very practically and say, here I have sadness, and here I have anger, and here I have elation, and here I have joy. I have all that, yet I am not that. I have them. So thoughts arise. And again, we do the same thing. We acknowledge the presence of the thoughts. And that is what we have in the world of thoughts. Then maybe memories of the past can show up. Oh, this reminds me through this feeling of when I was a little kid. Or this reminds me of yesterday. Or yesteryear, or yester lifetime. And yet, those are memories. I have memories. And yet, I am not the memories. And we go on till we come to a point in which we can deeply breathe in under the imaginary sound of I, and breathe out, And this rhythm of I, brings us to a tranquility, a serenity, better said, that might allow us to begin to ask the question that separates us from false identification. I am not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I'm not young, I'm not old, but I am. And I find that there is peace in that I am, in that beingness. That if there is anywhere that I can find it, is that source. And this is source of life. Your life and my life and no different life is life. And we connect, as you would say in Ubuntu, through that common denominator of life, of beingness. Not of the nostalgia of what we could have been had we, etc. But we are alive. And that is amazing to celebrate and amazing to be grateful. We are alive. We are participants of life. And you know, I'm starting a series in my work next weekend that is about what we call your life. The first 4 days is about live your life. And a few months later, it's about enjoy your life. And the next final cycle is about love your life. But we have to know how to live it so we can enjoy it and then ultimately love it.
Wow. You know, as you're speaking, I'm also reminded of another quote that I read in a book that said, when you are trying to find peace and you experience these emotions that come in the stillness, our emotions are like our children. When they come to us, you shouldn't push them away. You bring them closer to you and you sit with them for a while. They want your attention. They want to be felt. They want to be heard. And our emotions pass through us. So they come and they go all the time. So in times of sadness, in times of grief, in sad times like the times we're in now, you just have to sit with the emotions for a while and know that they are like our children. You bring them closer, you experience them, and they pass through us. So I've been trying to remember that, because as an empath, when I read some of these stories, I get extremely emotionally upset with the injustices that I see in the world. I have been experiencing some sadness around a few things that are going on in Zimbabwe, the marrying off of little girls.
Do you want to use Bixby translation, my Translate, or my Japanese
It's
dictionary?
my Bixby switching on. The marrying off of little girls in Zimbabwe as young as 11 or 12 absolutely breaks my heart. And it's because of the poverty levels. It's because nobody is focused on stopping child abuse, sexual molestation, pedophilia. And I left Africa because of that very reason, to protect my own little girl, who's now a mother. I'm now a grandmother, and I'm grateful that I'm living in the dream that I had 20 years ago. So it's difficult to deal with the issues of the world sometimes, and not take them on your shoulders.
But it's our issues. The world is not out there, the world is in here. And at least it affects me. It affects me because, I'm not a child. I have seen this. I've seen this for 3/4 of a century in my latest lifetime. And sometimes I feel very, very disappointed, very sad. Because even though it's been 74 years that the Human Declarations for Human Rights was written, and I happen to have met one of the redactors, a Chilean diplomat, Benjamin Cohen was his name, who was part of that committee in New York. I see that we are very far from human rights. We're also very far from human duties and responsibilities. Let me tell you something funny. We got a car, we got a Tesla. And a few days ago, the Tesla arrived. We have still not discovered the mystery if it came self-driving or somebody dropped him off. Him, I say, even though we call it alfalfa. And my wife and I are standing at the door, and I definitely felt like a chimpanzee, not knowing how to deal with this technology. We didn't know how to drive it into. You've been here just 10 meters into the driveway.
Yeah.
So I had to call for help, someone that I knew had a similar car, who showed us through instruction how to start it and bring it in. Now this happened the International Day of Peace. It arrived that day. The funny thing about it is that I'm so intimidated I still haven't driven it. I don't know. It's like driving my Apple. It's like driving a computer.
Yes.
My wife, of course, is delighted and is driving it all over. And I sit at the side and I look around and I feel that the other cars are relics from the past.
Yes. Yes.
I went to give back my BMW today, my petrol BMW, which I will never have again, which I don't want to have again, because at least let me begin the peace of the world with one less pollutant. Me. I don't want to pollute.
How fascinating.
Each one makes a difference. Each one makes a difference. And yet we could have used this energy crisis that's also provoked by our Russian friends, in a way. We haven't seen it yet because it's not yet the winter, but it could be a tragic effect for European countries because they have been breastfed with Russian oil. But we could have used this opportunity to go completely electric, to go completely alternative. But instead of that, we have another oil war taking place. Now, when will we get it? When? You know, I
It's
thought
greed.
greed, exactly. After World War II, I thought the world had known the worst. No, it keeps on happening. You have spoken about and educated me about what's happened and what's happening still today in Africa. And South America maybe is not so far. You know, we have gone through left and right, communists and dictatorships of the worst right-wing supremacists. We speak of supremacy in the United States, but the military in Chile and in Argentina and Uruguay and Brazil in the 70s were brutal. But they're also brutal in Cambodia.
Yeah.
And they still are brutal in places like Laos and Myanmar, the killing of Rohingyas, the persecution of a group of people that are Burmese, that believe in a different mindset of religion, that they didn't choose. They were domesticated by their parents into it. No baby says, I want to be Christian, I want to be Jewish, I want to be Muslim, I want to be Hindu. Babies don't say those things. I was even doubting, you know, and thinking about this attachment to believe in God that only humans have created. I'm not saying that there might not be a supreme principle, but it's not what has been given to us by organizations that believe they have kidnapped and laid power over the existence of a God that is only built in their own image, because it's not us built in the image of God. You know, I was thinking, you know, like a chimpanzee, if an extraterrestrial will come and explain to me higher technology, what would happen if I couldn't even understand the car?
Oh my gosh. It's interesting. It
How
really is
ignorant I am
interesting.
of a little more technology than being able to use the phone and the computer to a minimum extent.
And now technology has frog leaped again.
Yes. Yes. And it's done marvelous things. When I think of the speed in which I was treated a week ago in a little town in New Mexico, as I told you before.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that. But on the other hand, human relations were present in that particular town, which in the big city seem to have been neglected and forgotten.
Yeah.
And as much as we have technology, do we have human touch? Do we have the pleasure of being with each other? It's definitely less than when I was growing up.
So Eckhart Tolle talks about the human pain body and this need that we have to hurt, to inflict pain on ourselves mostly before it ripple effects to anyone else. It's like we are having a shared experience, and those that are less awake and aware are in a state of slumber, almost like they're sleepwalking through life.
Yes.
Talked about the effects of World War II and that we should have learned some lessons from that. Yet there are some people in this world who learn nothing
Right.
or choose
So,
to, yes, to pretend that there is nothing there to be learned.
a few years ago, and for many years, I had a relationship with a so-called friend who had the most dense and negative perception about everything. And for New Year's 2 years ago, it's my anniversary, that I disconnected my relationship with him because it was only taking energy and convincing me that nothing matters. And he had grandchildren. I said the corruption that's going on, the pollution that's going on, doesn't it affect you? Because this is the planet you're leaving to your grandchildren.
Yeah.
It's always been the same, was his answer. Always been bad. I said, if always something is bad, isn't it time that we do an effort
To
and try
change that.
to ethically change it and aesthetically change it, since those two frequencies, are important. I speak of ethical evolution. Well, is there a non-ethical evolution? No, but there is an interpretation of evolution, which is the survival of the fittest, which beholds competition instead of competence.
Yes.
And we have been guided through this post-Darwinian couple of centuries into competition. And competition leads to the idea that it's either you or me. And that creates separation.
Yeah.
And this separation is what runs the world. Instead of shifting the identity to I am human, I like to shift it to I am life, which is more than human, because, well, you've been here, you know my dogs, you know my trees. They're
Yes,
as alive as me.
they are. They certainly are.
It was so wonderful to have you here in the last month. It was really a blessing.
It was an honor for me too. It was pretty surreal, I must say. I always look back on my life. My kids watched the podcast all the time, and they said to me, "Mom, how do you do this? How do you meet these interesting people? And you get to meet them in real life." And I feel very, very honored and blessed that Spirit guides me to certain people who have really enlightened me and educated me, and who think and see the world through the lens that I see it as well. So it's always a pleasure to catch up with you, Dr. Carlos. It's
Thank you so much.
absolute pleasure. So we will be back again next week. We've left our listeners with a lot to ponder. I always like to end our conversations with something positive that they can take home and implement straight away. In Ubuntu, we say it starts with you. The ripple effect should go to your family, then your community, and then the rest of the world. What are your parting thoughts, Dr. Carlos?
Aristotle has inspired me in saying that happiness is the most important thing that can happen to a human being, and it's a function of 4 elements: family and friends, health and wealth. And by wealth, it's not this modern trillionaires, but there is a saying that rich is the one that's happy with his lot.
Oh, I like that. I love that.
So we're immensely rich, you and I, of being able to share and maybe, hopefully, emanate a vibration that can affect you and you and you, so that we can say we are truly in this together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll be back again next week with Healing Conversations with Dr. Carlos and Getrude Matshe. Have a fantastic week.
Wonderful. So
Thank
see you in a week.
Thanks, Dr. Carlos.